Prehistory is filled with a variety of strange reptiles closely related to crocodilians, from dinosaur-eating titans to terrestrial apex predators and even armored herbivores. However, there are also extraordinary true crocodilians, and some of these were alive relatively recently. One species, the horned crocodile Voay robustus, was still alive in Madagascar well after the end of the last ice age, lasting perhaps until just a few hundred years ago. Voay robustus was about 4 to 5 meters long with a powerful build, making it the largest predator in Madagascar when it was alive. While similar to other crocodiles in most regards, the horned crocodile's limbs were, as the name implies, more robust than the norm, indicating it spent more time on land than most of its relations. The closest living ecological equivalent is the Cuban crocodile, who also has long, robust legs and spends much of its time out of the water. Still, the Cuban crocodile remains primarily semi-aquatic, and the same is true of Voay robustus, unlike some other extinct terrestrial crocodilians like the Australian Quencana. By crocodile standards, Voay robustus's skull was short and deep. Besides the horns, the skull of the modern mugger crocodile is closest to the proportions of Voay robustus. Its horns were extensions of the squamosal bone on the skull. These extensions were not unique to Voay robustus. Some other crocodilians, such as the extinct alligator Siridhean and the modern Cuban and Siamese crocodiles, also have such horns. However, those of Voay robustus were far larger than in any living crocodilian. The squamosal bones in modern species are used to intimidate rivals and attract mates, and Voay robustus likely used them for similar purposes. Despite their similar horns and terrestrial habits, Voay robustus and the Cuban crocodile are not closely related. Comparisons of the morphology of Voay robustus and other crocodilians has usually found its closest living relatives to be the African dwarf crocodile and the West African slender-snouted crocodile. However, a recent study, which compared mitochondrial DNA extracted from a Voay robustus fossil to that of modern crocodilians, came to a different conclusion. The team found that Voay robustus was the closest known relative to the crocodilians in the Crocodilius genus, which contains the vast majority of modern crocodiles. The authors estimated that Voay robustus's ancestors split from the lineage that led to Crocodilius about 24.9 million years ago. The paper is also notable for suggesting that Crocodilius may have originated in Africa before spreading to the rest of the tropics. However, the paper is new, and it will take time to see whether or not its results are accepted by the rest of the scientific community. Voay robustus's native Madagascar has a very unique fauna. This is due to it being isolated from the rest of the world long before the end of the Cretaceous period, with only a few species arriving since then from rafting, flight, or in the case of Voay robustus's ancestors, swimming. Besides Madagascar's already strange surviving fauna, the horned crocodile also coexisted with other large animals, including giant lemurs, the small Malagasy hippopotamus, and the massive elephant birds. The horned crocodile was the largest of Madagascar's carnivores, which may be why it spent more time out of the water. With limited range and herbivores smaller than on the mainland, Madagascar may not have been able to support a dedicated terrestrial apex predator. However, Voay robustus may have adapted to basically fill the niche part-time, not unlike the Cuban crocodile in the Caribbean. The largest land predator after Voay robustus was the extinct giant fossa Cryptoprocta spelea, followed by the extant fossa Cryptoprocta ferox, and the extinct giant Malagasy crowned eagle. The Nile crocodile was also once thought to be present on Madagascar when Voay robustus was alive, though this is now uncertain. While small populations of Nile crocodiles live in Madagascar today, no Nile crocodile fossils or subfossils have actually been found there that date to before the extinction of Voay robustus. Furthermore, genetic evidence has found the current Nile crocodile population in Madagascar was established fairly recently from Africa. While the current population may have simply recolonized the island after the local extinction of their kin, the species may have been only able to establish itself there after the extinction of their horned relatives. Alternatively, the arrival of Nile crocodiles may have contributed to Voay robustus' extinction. However, during early contact with Europeans, the native population of Madagascar is reported saying there were two types of crocodilians on the island. One, presumably Voay robustus, was robust, while the other, presumably the Nile crocodile, was more gracile. Therefore, it would seem there was at least a brief period of coexistence between the two crocodiles. While doubts have been raised about whether they were able to coexist for long due to their similar size and habits, Voay robustus' shorter, deeper snout and far greater terrestrial affinity suggests niche partitioning was possible, much like how the modern Cuban crocodile coexists today with the more water-bound American crocodile. Regardless of whether Nile crocodiles were a factor, the extinction of Voay robustus was largely connected to the extinction of the rest of the megafauna on Madagascar. Part of this was because of a local dry period. However, the fauna had endured worse droughts in the past. Therefore, it seems humans were the primary cause of the extinction of Voay robustus. Previously, it was thought that humans only arrived on Madagascar just before the extinction of its megafauna, which is a pretty common trend among large island species. However, butchered elephant bird bones dated to before the end of the last ice age indicate humans were present there long before the extinction of the megafauna. Instead, it is now thought that the extinction of Voay robustus and its contemporaries was brought about by large population growth of humans on the island, which led to overhunting and, even more importantly, the destruction of their habitat to create farms. The exact date Voay robustus became extinct is unclear. The youngest subfossils that have been found date to about 1400 years ago. However, reports in the 1600s suggest the local people thought the horned crocodile was still around. Nile crocodiles were probably able to survive because they are generalist. On the other hand, Voay robustus was much more reliant on the now dwindling and soon to be extinct megafauna. Without them, it was doomed to extinction itself. Thank you for watching. And a thank you to Siridhean, which I am probably horribly mispronouncing, for suggesting the topic of this video. Have a great day, and if you enjoyed the video, please remember to hit the like button.